Ukraine faces a second front, the battle for its public finances. The IMF has granted a bailout, but wants Kiev's bondholders to share the pain. The creditors are resisting. In an FT column, Harvard professor Lawrence Summers writes that the case for debt reduction is as strong as any that I have encountered over the past quarter century. He is with me via video. Professor Summers, could you make that case, explain that case to Kiev's creditors? Why should they not push for getting all their money back?
There's no reason why the international community should put money into Kiev so that people who made bad loans can take money out of Kiev. Ukraine is not able to service its debts now. There's no realistic prospect that it will be able to service its debts in full down the road. The presence of a substantial debt overhang inhibits growth and economic activity in Ukraine, reinforces the political influence of the more reactionary elements in Ukraine, and represents an inappropriate call on the taxpayer resources of the industrialized world. So the IMF is quite right to insist that its financing be provided to help Ukraine, not to help creditors, but it needs to make sure that the leverage that comes from its need for a sustainable financial program is applied not to cause pain in Ukraine, but to cause creditors to accept reality.
Why can't we just postpone the payments, as some creditors have offered, just maturity extensions, but without outright reductions?
There's no sustainable or viable financial program on any reasonable economic projection for Ukraine down that road. It simply postpones the problem, and the knowledge and the uncertainty that come from large overhangs of debt will both inhibit reform in Ukraine and act to slow and deter growth in Ukraine. Much better to recognize reality now. If creditors are highly optimistic somehow about the future of Ukraine, there are various mechanisms like GDP warrants, like tying the bonds to what happens to Ukraine's exchange rate, that would enable them to reap substantial returns in what I think is the unlikely event that there's a boom in Ukraine. But I think we've had far too much in recent years of overly optimistic forecasts associated with IMF programs, and that being used as an excuse to avoid recognizing reality and having creditors take their share of the adjustment. So I think the better course is debt reduction now.
Even if there is reduction, how optimistic should we really be? Ukraine's long been one of Europe's most corrupt economies. The ousted regime of Yanukovych was a kleptocracy. What is the new government doing that makes you think we should trust them more than we could trust their predecessors?
No one should minimize the difficulties. But if you look at the adjustment Ukraine has made in energy prices that have risen more than tenfold, they've done more on energy prices in the last 12 months than most countries with substantial energy subsidies have done in the last 12 years. That's a reflection of their political courage. Finance Minister Natalie Jaresko has shown a real commitment to reducing corruption, to moving assets to the private sector, to adjusting inappropriately low public sector prices. And she's got the backing of the Prime Minister and the President. And so this is the best government we're going to see in Ukraine. And if we don't back this government with sufficient strength, there's going to be another much less satisfactory government, and we're going to have even less attractive choices in the West than we have today.
There's at least one creditor who may not agree with you on the quality of this government, and that's Vladimir Putin. The first bond to be repaid is held by Russia. Now, if Russia does not agree to a debt reduction, should Kiev declare unilateral default on that and perhaps on other bonds, on other creditors?
I think that can't be off the table. Just how the bargaining will work out, just how the negotiation will work out, I'm hesitant to say. But I think international experience is that it is the threat of default that brings realism to debt restructuring negotiations.
Professor Lawrence Summers, thank you very much for talking to us.
Thank you.